Pack your bags. This is my house. I pay the bills here. You don't get to stay. I am Jetman Bale. And those were the words my wife said to me on a Tuesday morning in front of her mother, our neighbors, and whatever version of God was watching Whitmore Lane that day. I want you to understand something before I tell you the rest of this story. I am not a man who raises his voice. I am not a man who slams doors or throws things or needs the last word in a room. My grandmother, Ruth, raised me in a 3-bedroom house in Tulsa, Oklahoma, on the belief that the strongest people never had to announce themselves. She used to say, "Jetman, still water runs the deepest." I carried that with me the way some men carry their father's watch. So when Diana stood at that hallway door with her arms folded and her chest heaving and her eyes daring me to push back, I didn't push back. I looked at her, and in that look, I was doing something she would not understand until much later. I was measuring the distance between who I had hoped she was and who she had just proven herself to be. It started with a toilet. That is the embarrassing, ordinary truth of it. I was on a call, a muted, international call involving a 7-figure infrastructure contract with a firm in Charlotte, when she came to the hallway bathroom and raised her voice at me the way a manager raises their voice at someone they have already decided is beneath them. "Your turn, Jetman. I'm not asking twice." I held up one finger. "One moment. Don't hold up a finger at me in my house." I told her I'd clean it that afternoon. She told me I would clean it now, and then she said it. The sentence that had been building in her for years, dressed up in toilets and turn-taking, but really about something else entirely. I work a real job. I carry this household. The least you can do is clean a bathroom when it's your turn. I had heard versions of that sentence before. Different words. Same architecture. The night she told her co-worker I did some consulting thing. While laughing in that particular way women laugh when they want everyone to know they're carrying dead weight. The afternoon she told me, quietly but not quietly enough, that her father had been a provider and she had not married to end up doing it herself. The birthday dinner where she introduced me to her colleagues as, "My husband, he's between things." I had logged everyone, not out of spite, out of habit. I am a precise man, and precise men document what matters to them. I had not known, when I started logging, how useful it would become. I walked to the closet. I pulled out my suitcase. I folded 3 shirts with the care of someone who had packed many times before, placed them inside, zipped the bag, and carried it to the front door. Diana had not expected that. I could tell by the way her voice changed. "Jetman." I kept walking. Please kindly like, share, and subscribe for more interesting stories. She followed me to the front door, still talking, her voice cycling through gears. Irritation first, then something that wanted to be authority, then something quieter underneath that she wouldn't name yet. Her mother, Patrice, appeared in the hallway in her robe, eyes wide, reading the room the way older women read rooms, completely and without asking. "You really going to leave?" Diana said, "You told me to." "I didn't think you'd actually," she stopped herself. That unfinished sentence would haunt her longer than anything else said that morning, because what lived inside it was a truth she'd never examined. She had never believed I had anywhere to go. I pulled out my phone, made 1 call, 2 words, hung up. Then I sat on the porch steps with my suitcase beside me and looked out at Whitmore Lane the way a man looks at something he is seeing for the last time, without making it obvious. "Where are you even going?" she asked from the doorway. I didn't answer. Across the street, Wanda Pruitt had stopped watering her plants. Diana noticed and lifted her chin. She was telling herself she was right. She would keep telling herself that. Right up until the limousine turned the corner. It was too large for our street. That was the first thing. The sheer scale of it moving slowly through a neighborhood of sedans and weekend SUVs. A black stretch limousine as out of place as a cathedral in a strip mall. The engine barely made a sound, just a presence, a low, expensive hum that seemed to change the air pressure on Whitmore Lane. The driver stepped out, dark suit, white gloves. He looked at me the way people look at someone they work for. "Good morning, Mr. Bale. Your bags." I handed them over. He placed them in the trunk with the careful precision of someone who handled important things for a living. I straightened my jacket. Then I turned and looked at Diana for the first time since I'd walked out the door. She was frozen, not the arms cross-frozen of someone gathering herself. The other kind, the kind that happens when the entire picture you built of a person cracks open and something unrecognizable is standing inside it. Down the block, a woman pushing a stroller had stopped walking. Darnell Pruitt was on his porch with his hands in his pockets. Diana's mouth opened, closed. Jetman. I looked at her one last time. No anger, no satisfaction, just finality, the quietest, most devastating thing one person can show another. I got in the car. The door closed. We pulled away. She stood on that porch for 37 seconds after the car disappeared. She counted them later without knowing why. Her mother said, "Baby, what was that?" "I don't know." "What do you mean you don't know? Who sent the limousine, Diana?" Her mind was running fast through everything she thought she understood. The consulting work she'd never asked about. The quiet calls he took in the other room with the door almost but never fully closed. A FedEx package delivered 18 months ago addressed to Jetman C. Bale, managing director. She'd signed for it, left it on the counter, never asked what it meant. A property he'd mentioned once, casually, as the place I use for retreats. She had not asked about any of it. "He does consulting," she said, and heard, for the first time, how thin the words were, how little weight they carried, how she had repeated them for years to fill a space she had never actually looked into. Wanda Pruitt was no longer pretending not to watch. Diana went inside, sat on the couch, called Jetman's number. 4 rings, voicemail, called again, 4 rings, voicemail. Third call, 1 ring, then silence. He had declined it. She sat with the phone in her lap, and her mother beside her not speaking, which was its own kind of answer. She did not go to work. She called in sick for first time in 2 years and moved to the house slowly. The way people move through spaces that have suddenly changed their meaning. Around noon, she went into his office. She had been inside it maybe 4 times in 2 years. It was always neat, desk, laptop, whiteboard, filing cabinet. She had never paid close attention to any of it. She paid attention now. The whiteboard held project timelines, client initials, numbers with more zeros than she had registered before. On the legal pad, meeting notes, financial figures, a company name she recognized from a CNN business segment she'd half-watched months ago. She remembered thinking, "That's some big operation somewhere. None of my business." In the unlocked filing cabinet. He had never needed to lock anything in this house. She found client agreements, quarterly reports, property tax documents for a Savannah address she had never heard him mention. She sat down on the floor, holding those documents. She sat there a long time. Then she called her best friend Tamara, and when Tamara answered cheerfully, Diana said something she had never said to another living person in her adult life. "I think I made a terrible mistake." Solomon Webb called at 9 the following morning. His voice was careful in the way of men who build risk models. Precise, without cruelty, but without softness either. "Mrs. Bale, I wanted you to know something, because Jetman won't tell you, and I believe in a person being told the truth before a door closes completely." She gripped the phone. "My partner has known for 3 years what he was walking into. He didn't want someone who loved his money. He wanted someone who'd stand by him without it. I told him it was a bad plan." A pause. He found his answer. "What does that mean?" "It means a man you told to leave owns more in this city than most people you've ever met. And that is not the point. The point is what you said to him. He logged it, Mrs. Bale. Every incident. Dates and exact language." Silence. "I'm not calling to threaten you. I'm calling because I'm a man who believes in fair warning." His voice steadied. "The door is closing. I thought you should know that." He hung up without goodbye. Diana sat still. Then she opened her call log and counted her unanswered calls to Jetman's number. 11. She wrote the apology letter 3 times. The first draft was defensive, explaining what she'd been feeling, why she'd been frustrated, how the pressure of carrying a household had worn her down. She read it back and heard herself making excuses dressed as honesty. She tore it up. The second draft was better, more bare, but she could still feel herself managing him in the language, still trying to control the outcome of her own apology. She tore that one up too. The third was 2 paragraphs. plain and unguarded in the way only things written on a third attempt can be. When she read it back, she cried for the first time since the limousine had pulled away. She drove to the Waldorf Astoria in Buckhead. The man at the front desk was kind and immovable. The manager said the same thing, more elaborately. She stood in a marble lobby she had never been inside, a hotel she understood now her husband frequented without ceremony, and looked at the folded letter in her hand. She drove home, set the letter on the kitchen counter. 3 days later, a certified envelope arrived from Claudette Fairbanks, ESQ. Inside it were divorce papers. The letter was still on the counter. Her lawyer, Petra Cole, set the documents down and looked at her steadily. He kept a journal. 3 years. Specific incidents. The birthday dinner where you described his work as embarrassing in front of colleagues. The afternoon you told him he'd never be what a real man should be. The morning he was asked to leave. Diana stared at the table. This is not a man who acted impulsively, Petra said. This is a man who documented a pattern. Is he going to use it publicly? Petra paused. Not long, but enough? No, it's for the abuse citation. But Mrs. Bale, she stopped, restarted. I want you to notice that was your first question. The words landed quietly, more quietly than a slap, which is always worse. What do I do? Diana asked. You can contest. You can request mediation. But I've read this filing carefully, and I think you need to decide what you're actually fighting for. Because if it's the marriage, there may still be a conversation to have. And if it's your dignity in a courtroom, she folded her hands. I don't think you can fight for both. Her mother came on a Tuesday. They sat at the kitchen table with tea neither of them tasted. You knew something was off, Diana said. Not an accusation. Just a fact she needed confirmed. I knew he was quieter than quiet, Patrice said. I told you once. People who are that still are either empty or full. I couldn't tell which. Why didn't you push me? Because you didn't want to be pushed. And because you seemed certain. A pause. You were always certain, baby. Even when you were 9 years old and your father left, you got up the next morning and made your own breakfast and acted like nothing had happened. I thought that was strength. I taught you to hold every card, so no one could ever take anything from you. She set down her mug. I didn't teach you how to let someone sit at the table. Diana's eyes filled. I never saw you do that, she said quietly. No, her mother said. You didn't, and I'm sorry for it. She reached across and covered her daughter's hand. That's mine to carry. What happened in this house? That's yours, but not alone. Mediation lasted 2 hours. Jetman arrived with Claudette, dark gray suit, precise. He sat across the table and was exactly as she remembered. Still, in the way of someone who has nothing left to prove to the room. They did not look at each other directly for the first 40 minutes. Numbers were discussed. The house on Whitmore Lane was discussed. He would release his claim freely, without contest, because, Claudette stated without drama, it had never been his primary residence. That landed in the room like something heavy set on glass. Near the end, after the main terms were settled, Jetman looked at her directly. She had prepared for this, had rehearsed what she might say, had promised herself she would hold together. She had not prepared for the absence of hatred in his face. People who've been wronged look at you with edges. Jetman Bale looked at her with nothing she had a word for. No anger, no coldness, no victory. Just a man completing something necessary. I want you to be well, Diana, he said. It was the worst thing he could have said. She would have preferred rage. She nodded, did not trust her voice. He left first. The house on Whitmore Lane was hers. That was what remained. The lease she'd signed, the furniture she'd chosen, the street she'd picked. All hers, exactly as she had insisted, in 100 small and large ways across 4 years. That it already was. She stood in the kitchen on a Saturday morning and made coffee and looked out of the lane where Wanda Pruitt was watering her plants again. And the world was continuing in its ordinary way. Darnell waved from across the street. She raised her hand back. She thought about what it had cost her. Not financially, though that was its own reckoning. The deeper cost. She had wanted a man she could see all the way through. Instead, she had married a man she had never fully looked at. And in the space between those two things, she had lost something that did not have a replacement. The letter was still on the table. She had not been able to throw it away. She picked it up, read it once more. Then she sat down with her coffee and her letter, and she began, very quietly, the work of becoming someone who did not need to hold every card to feel safe in a room. It was the hardest thing she had ever started. And Jetman Bale, in his city, in his life, in the quiet it always lived, was not there to see it. Some doors don't reopen. That was the truth she now carried, not as punishment, as instruction.